Thank you, Mr. White. And now we will have a superintendent's report, and if action is necessary. Dr. Melton.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. Board members, community, welcome out this evening for all those that are tuned in and those that are here in the room with us. Consistent with previous presentations, there's going to be an overview for the board this evening. Reentry entitled number 12. Of course, these first few slides the board has seen before. This presentation is for informational purposes. We're not making any recommendations at this time, but there has been a variety of activities that have gone on since the last time the board met. Of course, you've seen this slide before of our guiding principles. Not forwarding. There we go. Oh, now we've gone farther. There we are. You've seen our phases of reentry, and with the phases of reentry, we made sure that we noted the February 1st adjustment, which we, of course, have had. You've seen this slide many times before of the different focus areas within our decision-making process, all supported by priority number 5 of mine, of supporting a work and learning environment where students and staff feel safe physically, emotionally, and socially. This evening for an update, we've got some slides for the board to hear as well as the community regarding our ESSER II funds. This gives me a great welcome to our new Chief Finance Officer. Ms. Marty Rawls is here with us this evening. So, Ms. Rawls, if you would stand for us to have a chance to recognize and welcome you to School District 5. Ms. Rawls, of course, has had her first day, or is having her first day on the job today. So for this portion of the evening of this particular agenda item, I've got some slides for the board just to see some summary up to this point. Of course, these funds were passed on December 27th, 2020 in focus of the support in response to coronavirus. These, of course, are funds from the Department of Education. When you look at the third bullet, it breaks down how these funds are coming from the federal level into elementary, secondary schools, and public education across the country. This next slide breaks down subgrants. We know that there's a Title I effect, and for those that are still learning the language within education and public education, Title I is an indication of poverty level and status. So when you look at the second slide, this is the amount of monies that that South Carolina is going to be expected to receive for ESSER II funds. And then, of course, it's of note that 90% of these funds will flow through to school districts. These slides that I'm showing for ESSER II were sent to us as a portion of the presentations and trainings conducted by our State Department of Education. So I hope if anyone from the department listens in, they can see that their work is looping directly in to the work here in School District 5. And then third bullet, of course, you see the funds that will be used for state-level activities to address COVID-19 outside of education. Now, this is an important slide that I've included for the board to see and for the community to be aware of. This time, there is not a new application for districts to complete. Of course, our application was already completed for the first spending of ESSER I funds that I'll call now. But instead, we will be submitting a spending plan, and we'll have grant notifications so that we can show how the funds are being used. Districts are not required to use, we're not allowed to use any ESSER II funds for equitable services. That's some of the competition that you have of funds. So School District 5 will make sure that with the plan that we submit that we will definitely be in compliance. And then notice the date for the use of these funds through September 30th, 2023. These next couple of slides show the 15 areas of allowable uses of these funds. I'll pause for a moment for the board to have a chance to scan this. Of course, the board has seen these slides in preparation for this evening. These areas are consistent with previous funds, and then finishing out the 15, you see 6 through 11 here. And then the new allowable use of funds. And again, these slides are from our State Department of Education. So you see some of the new allowable focus of things. For the community and the board to hear, I've been fortunate to work with several advisory committees. These advisory committees are giving feedback to us, focusing upon these 15 different areas of use of allowable funds. I can tell you, based upon our initial conversation with a variety of stakeholders that includes parents, administrators, teacher voices, staff voices, of course, district administration, parents, community members, our health partners that have been involved with this. We are consistently hearing some things that the board has already articulated to us that you're concerned about. Capital projects, the physical environment of our schools, the physical work and learning environment, of course, learning loss, and the mental wellness and well-being of our families, our students, and then, of course, any loss that our students may have, and how might we be responsive throughout non-traditional learning times, such as capturing time during the summer, or time that may be a little different than the traditional school day. So I'm appreciative of all those advisories and those that have accepted invitations for one more meeting to be involved with us on this. Now that Ms. Rawls is here, she's going to be directly involved with orchestrating how the board is going to be updated with these funds and the use of School District 5. Of course, we're using the strategic plan, but we're also using the process of updating our strategic plan and how might COVID affect the long-term vision of School District 5 and also the short-term operations of COVID funds and also all resources available to School District 5. The next portion of our update this evening, our Director of Accountability is going to lead with us in, Mr. Holden.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nutt. We are talking tonight about the COVID-19 dashboard and the brief history of what we've been doing with the dashboard, as well as recent changes that have occurred with it as well. At our November 30th board meeting from 2020, the board passed a motion that asked the district and administration to prepare a dashboard. At that time, the dashboard was a weekly dashboard, and it tracked a few key statistics in our district, including the number of active COVID cases among staff and students, as well as the number of quarantines in staff and students. That data was disaggregated by school, and we also tried to break out 5 numbers as well as other key data to make it clear which numbers were referring to students and teachers in the in-person instructional setting and which ones were related to 5 as well. More recently, we've made some other updates to the dashboard based off of feedback from our community and feedback from the board as well. We've continued to listen and hear folks out on different changes that they would like to see with the dashboard. Ms. Goggins has been a part of that. I have been a part of that. Nurse Stanek has listened as well, and our human resources team. We've all been listening and looking at what we can do. Ultimately, the decision was made based on all that feedback to move forward with a daily dashboard. So beginning February 16th, we have switched from updating the dashboard on Fridays to now the dashboard is updated every afternoon. It still contains the same statistics. We're still looking at positive cases among students and staff, and we are still looking at quarantine staff and students, except now we're looking at that information on a daily report as opposed to a weekly report.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. The next portion of the report this evening for reentry focuses upon staff vaccinations. This, of course, is a popular conversation across the state of South Carolina, especially within public school districts. I'd like to once again thank the board for their advocacy and involvement with trying to make sure that our state leaders hear the will of this board, the interest in this board to support accelerating vaccinations for the staff of School District 5 and all public educators across South Carolina. Mr. Beambo, our Executive Director of Operations, is here this evening to offer us an update regarding our vaccination planning. Mr. Beambo, as he prepares to share these remarks, we would both celebrate our increase with our medical partnerships. We have strengthened the number of partners that we have in the medical community. We've strengthened the relationships we already had that were pre-existing. And I think that we would all agree that the conversations between public education and our health supporters in the community have definitely increased and focused on the wellness of our students and also the wellness of our community. Mr. Beedenbow.
Thank you, Dr. Melton, Chair Hammond, board members. We have selected our health care provider that has agreed to work with our district to implement our vaccination plan specific for District 5. We have not signed a memorandum of understanding with our health care provider, so I will leave that detail out on purpose until we have signed that agreement with them. Our vaccination implementation plan will best accommodate our staff by offering a specific site for vaccinations. We have 1,702 teachers and support staff that have requested a vaccination. We'll be working with our health care provider, our school principals, on logistics to set up our schedule, along with Dr. Harris, Nurse Stanek, and our school nurses as we implement our implementation plan, and we will let this be known after we sign our memorandum of understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Beedenbow. And of course, the board will receive that communication as soon as this is signed. We don't want to be premature and announce something that we do not have signed with agreement of partnership so that we can offer information that will be accurate. I do want everyone to hone into the scheduling component of this slide. You heard Mr. Beanbo reference, we are looking for the right partner that's going to allow us to have our staff vaccinated, and I suspect there are some among this group that have already had their vaccine, and we're told that there could possibly be side effects. So we're looking for the right fit partner that will allow us to schedule our staff with a committed schedule so that our staff is not frustrated. Those over 1,700 employees that would like to have the vaccine, so that they're not frustrated by it. They have a scheduled appointment. They have one location to go to within the School District 5 community for ease of our employees and to make sure that they have the opportunity for their wellness. So for the days that we're going to be using, once we get this contract agreement signed, we are likely to ask for 2 of our e-learning days. Of course, School District 5 is one of the, we're in our first year of being an e-learning district as approved by the Education Oversight Committee. And because of that, we need to make sure that our staff is available to have their vaccine while an e-learning day is underway. So since the staff may be in line someplace or being watched for their 15 to 20 minutes, if they have any side effects, we will have e-learning activities going on, but we certainly will make sure that our families have the opportunity to get prepared for this. But we do want to make sure the public hears this evening and the board is very much aware of why we would need to do a scheduling adjustment using for the first time e-learning days that we have added to our calendar when necessary. Mr. Beanbo, thank you for that information. And then, of course, the last slide is just a summary of this was our update number 12 regarding our reentry efforts. Ms. Hammond, I'm sure that there are questions, so I will pause for questions that you and the board may have.
Thank you, Dr. Melton. Appreciate that, all the work from everyone. I'll entertain questions. Mr. Lovelace?
First of all, Dr. Melton, I think, and I'll follow your, if this is not the place that you intended for this, but we had a letter from one of our employees that asked about hardships. And basically they were saying that, as I have it pictured, that we were still moving people into classrooms after he thought that, or he or she thought that was supposed to be ended. So you asked me to ask that question, so I'm putting it to you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Lovis, I appreciate that. There are times that board members receive questions, and I can answer them, but it helps so much that the public hears about this as well. So I've gone back to this slide, and I'll ask Dr. Harris or Mr. Giuliano, whichever would prefer to answer this question. Dr. Harris, of course, has been uniquely involved with this. Looking at the scheduling component of how students have been reassigned, they may have asked to change from one model to another. So Dr. Harris, how would you respond to that question to make sure our community is aware and that the board hears?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. The short answer to that is yes, there are opportunities or times in which students have made requests and that they have, we've honored those requests where applicable and when space is available. We heard about scheduling. That is a big part of this. So not every student who makes a request or every family who makes a request, we're not able to honor each one of those for that very reason. But there are some extenuating circumstances where we would want to do that. And so those, for that reason, those do continue to occur.
And Mr. Lovis, I think I would add to that, Dr. Harris shared with me earlier today that there are some situations where class size is beginning to be large. So there may be some families that are expecting and a quick response to change assignments. And Dr. Harris and his office will make sure that families understand that some of the transitions from one model to another are likely to be affected by the number of students that are asking to move. So some of the customer service that families have experienced to this point may start changing because of the number of students we already have reaching capacity in certain places. So the grade level, the content of the classes, all those kinds of things, again, affect our scheduling, scheduling of students, scheduling of staff. Thank you, Mr. Levis, for the question.
Any other questions? Ms. Huddle?
I think another question that the teacher had or concern was that some of the students coming from 5 were not up to speed and maybe had not been fully participating. So I was just wondering, is there any kind of, and I'm not advocating formal testing, but is there any kind of process to evaluate the needs of these students as they come back into the face-to-face?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Huddle. We're always concerned about the academic performance of our students. Mr. Giuliano, I'm going to ask you to come to the microphone. Of course, Mr. Giuliano works with Dr. Blunt of our Secondary 5 program, Ms. Lunsford of the elementary program. As far as our typical testing and assessments of processes, Mr. Giuliano, what might we do that's going to be consistent with other years, but also what might be differently led this year as students transition from one program to another?
So thank you. We do have certain MAP testing that we do throughout the school year. That's across the board. But then also we have our combative formative assessments, which are done on a regular basis as teachers start new units and are really working on those priority standards. And those combative or formative assessments really give teachers information that they can adjust their instruction based upon the information that the students are giving in those assessments. We also have some times that are established and set up where our students can get additional assistance from teachers as set up to make sure that they can catch up if they're missing some work or just if they're missing particular content. They have times that are specific that they can work with the teachers in the 5 program as well.
Mr. G, I would compare that with any time there's a new student to any class or section, no matter what the age of the child may be within our educational system. It's normal for our teachers to do an assessment of an intake process. But since these students are already in the 5 model, transitioning from 5 to on-site or vice versa, we have the common formative assessments rather than assessing where a student may be from another district coming into ours. So there are some benefits to that. This is an opportunity for me to do a PSA, a public service announcement to all those families that are out there listening in. Students, we need you to complete your work on time and completely complete your work. The staff hears me say summarize the summary. So students hear me say completely complete. Those are soft skills that the workforce expects of us once we get out there to reach deadlines and be on time and to do our best effort. So my request for families is to make sure they're staying in touch with our teachers. Regardless where a student is in School District 5, we expect our pacing to be on schedule and on point, and for our families to be of support to make sure that we're meeting the interest and the needs of the student, and of course their academic trajectory to be successful over time.
Thank you. As a teacher, I know they like to hear that for their students. I would like to add, just as experience, a shout out for teachers. I have this happen in my classroom all the time where somebody that's been virtual and then they decide to come face to face. And even though some students thrive in the virtual, the majority of students learn best face to face with a teacher because that teacher can make sure those deadlines are met. And so I would just say one of the biggest ways that this is solved is that good teacher in that classroom, because you just have to work with that kid that's behind, and that's what our teachers probably end up doing. And but it is a good thing for you to tell them about parents staying on it. But I just want to say, I know what teachers are. There is a balancing act there, and that's one of the other burdens on a teacher, and one of the reasons they teach, because they love it. They just have to work a little harder with that kid, and that's just a fact of the COVID. I'll be glad when it's over. Mr. Lovelace, well, let me see. I have not called any other questions. I won't go to anybody till everybody's had a question. I'll wait till the end. I have one. Do you mind? Do you mind? Okay. 2 of my most important, and you and I have talked about this, but I'd love for you to expand on it. I had a great conversation with Molly Spearman, and she's looking at the whole state, and we're looking at our district. But it is a fact. There's a great deal of learning loss, and it's nobody's fault. It's the COVID. So I know we can use some of these funds, Dr. Melton. So that, along with, I have 2 things, and the other is the mental health. I know that the social and mental well-being, I know of my 8th graders, they need socialization, they need each other. There's been we need mental health. We needed it before COVID with kids. But I'd like to see if you could share with teachers how we might face the learning loss, how we might spend some of that money, and the mental health.
That is, of course, part of the work that we're doing now with our advisory committees. I celebrate the voice of our support staff and our teachers, our certified staff. They have participated with great commitment to these planning conversations we've had thus far. The learning loss, of course, we could think about it through the academic lens of the academic year 2020 to 2021, but it really goes back to March of 20. And because of March until June of 20, and then add to that whatever summer loss we may have had that you typically do have, especially with younger children. And Ms. McCaskill is our Director of Elementary. We're at the microphone. She would talk about elementary is consistently concerned about summer slide, is what it's called. So that added to the March-June summer slide, and then the choice of options, whether it's someone changing models or someone coming to a model and staying in that, experiencing quarantine. Dr. Harris described it today as the number of disruptions. And there are many of our families, teachers, and students that have had many disruptions. There are a few that have had no disruptions. So I honor that space and the continued flexibility and commitment of our staff, that regardless how many disruptions a child or family may have had, it's placing strain on families, it's placing strain on our staff. So I cannot say thank you enough to our teachers, all of our support positions for their continued efforts to individualize instruction and to support families and to support our students. When we're looking ahead as to what we may do, learning loss is of great interest to us, and listening to some of our high school secondary teacher representatives, they of course are concerned about Carnegie credits of students to be on time and on track for their foundational courses to be able to graduate on time. If you talk with our primary teachers, our early childhood staff, they will tell you they're concerned about learning gaps, because we know that children that are younger are learning to read, and then as readers get older, readers are reading to learn. Robin Cox is celebrating somewhere out there. She's our ELA coordinator. She is doing a happy dance somewhere. Those that know Robin Cox know that she's doing a happy dance out there. Because of the focus on reading, we know that reading is going to affect every student. So we don't want to send the message that reading is the most important, but reading supports all content areas. We are trying to make sure that we have the right components from a variety of teachers with different content areas to have the right curriculum components without it being one more thing for our teachers. We felt that LEAP last year was a great success for School District 5 for those that took part in it. We do not anticipate those kinds of funds to come from the state this year. So how might School District 5 need to use ESSER 2 funds or available funds to make sure that there's some certain learning experiences? Middle school, summer school, high school, summer school, Dr. Harrison team are working with that to get that organized, but how might it look a little differently? Summer reading camp has been provided by the state of South Carolina with the passage of Read to Succeed. We would make sure that that continues, but how might that need to be tweaked? So Mr. Giuliano and Dr. Turner are currently looking for that summer leader for that particular program that's very specialized for our students that are younger at the primary ages. But how might we reach beyond that rising third grader, fourth grader to reach a wider audience of need? Mental health continues to be of concern. The partners for the mental health continue to be of concern. Of course, our partnership with Hayden Hurst Foundation, also with the University of South Carolina Professional Development School Network, their support of us being a PDSD, the first of its kind in the country. Our work with mental health continues to advance and accelerate, but we know that we're not aware of every need of every student. So as this continues and students get settled, we're going to find new things. The board, of course, has recently discussed behavior and supportive behavior, because we're going to have some students that are very anxious. We're going to have some students that have not been in the normalization of a classroom environment. They've had the virtual environment, have done well. But just that anxiety of socialization and changing classes and being on time, getting from point A to point B rather than logging in, all that's a part of our planning of our PBIS initiatives of how we can make sure that there's orientation, inception of students to assure their success and to remind them of what they did before things were disrupted. So although I can't say we're going to have this on this date, I hope that is enough of an overview to let you know we're very thoughtful, collaborative of all departments, collaborative of all levels, that School District 5 has a long-term and a short-term commitment to bring some normalcy back, but a commitment through 2023 using these funds. We're not going to do a huge expenditure at once and then regret that a year or so later. We're going to do some program evaluations. We're going to do ongoing analysis to make sure what we're doing is effective, because I'll say this once again, we've never done this before. And I cannot say enough to the staff of School District 5. It seems that every time I say we've not done this before, they don't meet the expectation, they exceed the expectation. So as the superintendent of the school district, I thank our staff. They continue to write history in the most positive commitment way. We learn from our mistakes, and our experiences bring us improvement.
Dr. Melton, on one way to evaluate that learning loss, I'd like to know what our teachers, and I'm sure you know, what our teachers feel as far as lobbying the legislature, because I think they're having I talked with Ms. Spearman, and there's a little bit of disconnect there between the legislature and her idea. The South Carolina Ready test versus, I think we're arguing that MAP and STAR could show what they've lost and what they need. Really better than this, because a lot of teachers are very anxious about the South Carolina Ready. And I think the legislature, now it could be a change today, I haven't checked, but as of last week, some of them were pushing for our teachers to still have to do the South Carolina Ready this year, when we know that those scores could be in the pits, and it's going to reflect negatively on teachers that have worked so hard. So I wanted to see if you wanted to tell me or the public to lobby us as a board to lobby for the MAP or STAR testing. Have I stepped in something that you don't want to say?
Don't give me stolen instruction, Ms. Hammond.
I know it.
Dr. Harris,
I
get the
should've.
timer out, because I'm about to take it here.
I mean, I'm having one
This is the
too.
opinion of Christina Melton, with a former student of mine in the audience, so I doubt that she would be surprised when I answer this question.
You go for it.
We have to remember, as a community, there are summative assessments and formative assessments. If South Carolina is measuring summative results, then that's what we need to do. If we're measuring growth, and we're measuring the growth that our teachers are working with our students, then we need to measure formative growth. What do I support? I support formative growth. Because during a time that has been a calendar year as of this month, a full calendar year, I don't believe it's fair to ask our teachers to report summative results when students at the secondary level, students at the elementary level missed March, April, May, and June of instruction last academic year, yet we started in a new place with revised curriculum over the summer, and our teachers have been focused on curriculum, pacing, assessment, relationship building, priority 5 of mental wellness, social well-being, all of that during a time that's been so unusual. So if Christina Melton were asked an opinion, I would say all day long, I want formative assessments because I know that our teachers will show growth. I'm confident that if we did rely on summative results, our teachers will be very successful because of their commitment to our students. But as public education, are we trying to report public education, or are we trying to improve public education?
Oh, I like that statement. Board, now, I would like you all to lobby for that at the State House. Do you hear me? It would help teachers. They really are anxious about what she's saying. What teachers are having to, and showing growth in this situation is important, and we're in this argument, so, you know, I'm asking for lobbyists. Mr. Lovelace. I know it, I'm sorry, but I had to get this teacher thing in.
I will definitely do anything I can. I don't know if I can explain it, but I can ask for it.
I'll make you some notes, Mr. Lovelace, if
Okay,
I need
give me
to.
a note
I'll
card.
send you some text messages.
Okay, I have these probably pretty easy questions, okay? First of all, if you can wrap this second question back into the first one. Okay, in order of magnitude, how much, I saw we had, the state was going to get $894 million, and how much would be in order of magnitude as a good, I know you don't know exactly, but I mean, if you took that sum and divided it by 88 school districts, would we get an equivalent amount, or are they going to give it more to lesser endowed school districts, or how does that work?
Mr. Beebe, I want to ask you to come to the microphone. We have been working on this as a staff because it's based on Title I allocations. So every district will not get the same, but there is a formula used. Mr. Beambo, if we were, although Ms. Rawls would say we've not gotten our amount thus far for School District 5, what would you share with the board of what we're looking at based upon our webinar and current training?
Approximately 6.6 million is the amount that we anticipate getting.
For
Yes,
School
ma'am.
District 5?
For District 5.
How much was
And it's, the other question I had, and you take me to school on this one, please, but it said in there that the federal people would not allow equitable funds. What does that mean?
That is very technical. Mr. Giuliano, I'm going to ask you to help me with that. If there are programs, the first funds that we received, and Ms. Rawls, I'll ask you if you're comfortable assisting with that too, to bring relevance to this, because it's very educational finance related. The first amount of funds, we had to offer the opportunity for charter schools and private schools within our community to have competitive opportunities to get some grants, some of this fund because it was considered grant to start with an application. These funds have changed because that funding is going to be a little differently. Ms. Rawls, what would you like to add to that? On the first day of the job, Ms. Rawls, what would you like to add to that?
That's completely correct. We do not have to share these funds with other districts. They will be funded in other ways. So these are all for public school districts, the whole $846 million.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms.
I
Rawls.
understand now.
I hope she'll come back tomorrow.
We're glad to have you. Any other questions for that? Ms. Hines?
I have a question. When do we expect to know a definite in what we will be awarded from the state? And when do we expect for the districts to bring their suggestions to the board? Do we know a time frame?
I don't have a time frame. We had training the first week of February. As far as our webinar statewide, we are still awaiting the next level of guidance from the State Department of Education. It has been very clear from the department that the COVID-1 funds, what I'll call the ESSER Funds 1, are all expected to be expended before ESSER 2 were to start. We were very far into that, the use of that. The board is going to see a difference of presentation. Ms. Rawls and I have had many conversations during her transition. She is going to be prepared to keep the board updated with where we are with our pacing of these funds, our long-term vision, how it aligns with our strategic plan, and then our short-term focus. Of course, with advisories being involved and stakeholder committees that we've engaged, you're going to see the perspectives and the feedback that we're receiving from all those who are taking the opportunity to contribute to this planning. So the board will hear that. You will hear with capital report later, budget that Mr. Cannon and Mr. Beambo will be presenting, how might capital projects need to be captured within these funds. Every time Mr. Beambo comes in my office, I think he adds another 0 to his request for physical needs. And I suspect Mr. Lovelace has his list over here, so I'm not going to look at Mr. Lovelace because he probably would add another 0 to Mr. Beambo's list. But when Mr. Cannon does the presentation later this evening, you're going to see some of the needs that we've identified and how might these ESSER 2 funds come into effect for that so that we can make sure we're maximizing this unique opportunity.
And that was the reason behind my question, is how these ESSER 2 funds would relate to our capital fund budget.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you for that.
Anybody else on that? Ms. Huddle?
So will there be a separate budget set aside for the ESSER funds, and will you ask the board to approve that budget, or how will that work?
I'll look to Ms. Ross for that. We haven't had a chance necessarily to talk about that, but there is a different process with this than the first time. The first time was an application that had to be submitted to the State Department. This, of course, is going to be a plan. It's going to be the work of the administration to make sure that we bring to the board with some flexibility, because we may do some estimations, and I'll use summer learning example. We may have some data from Dr. Harris and Mr. Holden that projects X number of students might need this service during the summer, but then a lesser amount of students take the opportunity to use that. So the budget may actually be less than we expect. So there's going to be some dynamic ebb and flow of this. But Ms. Rawls, based upon your style and the way that you have, our conversations and your transition into School District 5, anything that you would recommend at this point that we could do?
I think we really have to wait on the grant award notification from the state, and that'll give us our final award amount. And then once we have that, we'll be able to look at the priorities that have been identified by district staff and all the partners that we have, and come up with a spending plan for you all to approve. And then that would be entered. Now, along the way, if there need to be adjustments and amendments to that spending plan, obviously those would be able to happen as well. I did look this afternoon at our ESSER 1 funds, and we are almost, I would say 98% expended on those. So we are probably, as soon as we can get this grant award notification, going to be ready to roll with all this information.
Thank you, Ms. Rawls.
Anybody else? Okay, Dr. Melton, you want to go to your next one?
Yes, ma'am. And in closing of this particular report this evening, this is our 5th week of 5 days face-to-face instruction. I'd like to say thank you to our families and our students. They continue to extend grace to us, even in times of frustration. I appreciate all those that are having conversations rather than statements. The more conversations we have, the better we can hear, the more we can partner, and the more we can intervene. And I cannot say thank you enough to our support staff, our teachers, our administrators. They continue to focus on students. We continue to take care of one another. Mental health is real for us adults, too.
That's right.
And I just thank this staff so much for their commitment. I said earlier, but I'll say it again, School District 5 does not meet the expectations. School District 5 exceeds the expectation. So next, I'll move to the next item of report this evening. Dr. Harris, our Chief of Planning and Administration, is going to come forth. Of course, the board has taken action recently on some redistricting. The language we're using for this to try to recalibrate the language, many people refer to grandfathering. We don't. We're very mindful of what we name things, how we're trying to make sure that we're affecting the culture of operations of School District 5. So Dr. Harris is here this evening to talk about redistricting exemptions for the next academic year of 21-22. Dr. Harris.
Thank you again, Dr. Melton, members of the board, and to our general community. First, let me begin by saying thank you to this board again for your approval on January 25th as you approved what is commonly referred to as Scenario 5 regarding our redistricting initiative. I offer that thanks because that set the tone for us to have this conversation regarding exemptions. And as you've heard Dr. Melton so eloquently explain, that we prefer to use the term exemptions as opposed to grandfathering. So you will hear that term throughout this presentation. You'll hear it as we go forward in the coming days as well, that exemptions as opposed to grandfathering. We'll note for you that this conversation is also based on board policy. We've got a couple of policies that give us some direction and some guidance regarding this conversation, BBA, which is Board Powers and Duties, and CBC, which is Superintendent Duties and Responsibilities. Those are at least two board policies that give us credence to have this conversation. It's important to note that this is in reference to our school year 2021-2022. We took note of the fact that the board did in fact indicate that at some later time that we would look at redistricting in terms of the larger scale. So rather than putting this in ink completely for ever and a day, we're looking at this for 21-22, and then we can certainly come back and revisit should we need to do that. But the exemptions, redistricting exemptions, are specific to Chapin Elementary, Lake Murray Elementary, and Piney Woods Elementary School, the areas which were specific to the redistricting in Scenario 5. There are a couple of bullets, as you see there on the board, that you have available to you. Again, basically beginning with first, that this is a student, in order for a student to qualify and be considered for exemptions, the student must have a permanent resident here in School District 5 prior to July 1st, 2021. We felt that was important, date and time, prior to the start of a new year, that persons who are here would have opportunity to, who are coming in now at this particular time, would have opportunity to participate should they choose in these exemptions. It begins also saying that the rising fourth graders, students who will be fourth graders on next year, who were impacted by the 2018-2019 enrollment freeze, may in fact remain in their school that they currently attend for the 21-22 school year. Know that it's important because in the Chapin area, all of the fifth grades, of course, matriculate into Chapin Intermediate School, 5 and 6. So if they are rising and they have one final year in the school in which they have been redirected, they certainly have opportunity to remain there and to finish out. Siblings of those rising fourth graders also, we're talking specifically students who will be kindergarten and through third only, who are also impacted, will have opportunity to remain in that particular school in which they currently attend through the highest grade level. This will be consistent with our policy that we will refer to in just a little bit later in this presentation. With all of our school of choice, with all of our, this particular exemption rather, parents and legal guardians to assume responsibility for transportation, and certainly acceptable discipline must be in effect as well. Students who arrive after July 1st, 2021 will attend, will not have benefit of the exemptions, but will attend the school in which they are zoned to attend, be it Chapin, Lake Murray, or Piney Woods Elementary School. So we have 5 bullets actually that speak to the exemption that we wanted to discuss tonight. We want to shift gears for just a moment and offer too, as part of this conversation, a second part of this about school of choice. And we want to present to you an opportunity that we believe would be a very viable opportunity for Piney Woods Elementary, and that is making it a school of choice option. Those students who are K through grade 4 at Piney Woods, we want to make that school also on the list of school of choice. Consistent with school of choice, as I referenced earlier, any school of choice, a magnet program, again, consistent with our board policy, JFBA, intra-district transfer and withdrawal. Students who are accepted through that lottery, electronic lottery, random lottery process, are there through the highest grade level. They have opportunity to remain in that choice school through the highest grade level. And then again, parents and legal guardians resume responsibility for transportation as well. And discipline, acceptable discipline and attendance also must go into effect. These are the areas in which we would offer tonight regarding exemptions as well as introduction and the request regarding school of choice for Piney Woods Elementary School. We'll turn the floor back over to you, Dr. Melton.
Dr. Harris, I appreciate your inclusion of policy. Of course, this is slated here, Ms. Hammond, with my report with actions necessary. When I was discussing this with the officers, we thought this would be an appropriate place to place it. The board chose to take action, but we know that families are beginning to become interested And for staffing purposes, Dr. Turner and staff and our principals are very anxious about settling so that we can better start staffing our schools and preparing the scheduling for our students. So, Ms. Hammond, I'll look to you to see if there's any questions that you'd like to ask of the board.
So, Dr. Milton, you would be pleased if it pleases the board to have an action on that being a school of choice for K through 4th?
Yes, ma'am. It is a recommendation of the administration. This is what we work towards. If the board has the will to do that, then of course action can be taken. This is for your information to hear this from us this evening. If you'd prefer that this be placed on a discussion or an action for upcoming meetings, we can certainly do that. But we want to make sure that the context for this information was given to the board, because this, again, is something new for School District 5. It's something that adding a new school and how this is going to affect certain schools at this point, knowing that redistricting is going to expand over time.
All right, well, I will hear from the board. I think I saw Ms. Hines first. You'll be Mr. Lovelace next.
I have several questions, but I'll just ask one at a time.
Then I'll come back to you.
My first question is regarding the rising 4th graders at the individual elementary schools. It says that rising 4th graders impacted by the enrollment freeze may remain at the school that they currently attend. I want to make sure that I'm clear. Does that mean that the students that are now at Chapin Elementary and at Ballantyne Elementary that are rising 4th graders have the option to stay at those two schools, but rising 4th graders at Lake Murray Elementary are not included in that enrollment freeze? Does that make sense? So my families that are impacted by the enrollment freeze were trying to get into Lake Murray. The enrollment freeze impacted Chapin Elementary, where students went to Chapin Elementary, and then there was an enrollment freeze at Chapin Elementary, and those students went to Ballantyne. Mm-hmm. So my question is, students that were not, I guess, impacted by that enrollment freeze, that are already at Lake Murray, that are rising 4th graders, that are going to be impacted by the redistricting, are they allowed to, I guess, opt in? May they be allowed to stay at Lake Murray, or is it only those students that were originally zoned for Lake Murray?
Good question. Students, if they're currently attending Chapinell, Lake Murray, Ballantyne, the schools, that they have opportunity to participate in these exemptions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Ms. Blackburn-Hines, we want to make sure that what we convey to the public and to the board is we want to keep families together. We don't want a family divided between two schools. But if this is not worded in a way that's clear, that when we message this, when our communications department sends this out, if additional information needs to be added, we can certainly revise this. It is our hope to be as effective with our external communications we can be to prevent any kind of confusion. So this is in our head, but if it doesn't make sense to you all, give us some feedback so we can refine it to make it better than it already is.
Right. I mean, I hate to use my own children as an example, but we are currently zoned at Lake Murray Elementary. This does not apply to me because my child is not a rising 4th grader. But looking at this, I would think because we are currently zoned at Lake Murray and we were not impacted by the enrollment freeze, reading this, I would think that we would still have to go to Chapin Elementary because of the way that the enrollment freeze is worded. And also, just another thought is that I know that we will be rezoned, but I haven't heard, or redistricted. I have not heard anything saying that we need to register our children at school, register our children in school at the new school, or that we are being redistricted. So I don't know how that impacts us, and I'm sure that that communication is coming, but I know that my current elementary school has already started registering kindergartners. So that's just
We would like to have this resolved before we start doing that, because we know that one is going to affect another, and we don't want one to confuse another.
Right.
So it is our hope that we can have a package of communication information to go out so that our families can be as clear and our staff not be disrupted by a number of questions that we could have avoided had we managed this more effectively.
absolutely.
Good
Thank you.
point, thank you. Mr. Lovelace.
I was just going to ask that we do have a discussion of school of choice for the school on Amy's Ferry Road. So I wanted to just say that I think it would behoove the board to discuss that.
Anybody? Ms. Huddle.
I want to go back to something Ms. Hines said. So I'm wondering, I'm just thinking out loud. I know we picked scenario 5, but we've lost a lot of children to private school, homeschool. When you look at the numbers that Malone and McBroom gave us, and you compare the forecast for the 3 schools, Lake Murray, Chapin, and Piney Woods, to the current 45-day enrollment, it's 150 students higher. In other words, they're saying we're going to have 150 more students this fall than we have right now. And I guess I'm just wondering, with all the turmoil and everything we've got going, do we really want to move kids from Lake Murray Elementary to Chapin Elementary and maybe have to change it again in a year when we look at the whole district? I've also driven down Old Lexington and Wessinger, and there's so much land being cleared. I just wanted to put it out there. I know we approved the line, but I guess I'm asking my fellow board members and Dr. Melton, is there any concern that we went too far with that line and that we should consider leaving the line in place, maybe even leaving the enrollment freeze in place for 1 year until we figure out the whole district? So I just put that out there.
Any thoughts with Ms. Huddle's point? That would require, though, we voted, right, Ms. Huddle? I mean, we'd have to vote to change that.
Yeah,
if we
I'm not
change
making a motion. I just wanted to get
You wanna put that
feedback
out.
from Dr. Melton and anybody else
Yeah.
that cares. I'm just worried about putting kids through change at this time when it may not even really be necessary, and then changing again in a year.
I think that's a valid point. Ms. Gardner?
I think, I don't think we have a choice. We have to make that line because otherwise we wouldn't have a line for Piney Wood School. So I think there has to be a line, and Lake Murray Elementary School it is overcrowded and it needs relief. And I think that even if we have to change the lines again in a couple of years, we can still do the grandfathering, or we can give options like we do now. I think our ultimate goal, and I think we all have different goals for this, might be to make all of our schools school of choice. I know that's something we should probably talk about. I think you have to make the line there in order for us to move forward. It might not be pretty, but if people are impacted by it, they can hopefully apply and go to the school that they want to, because there will be room for choice. And I don't think, we can't see the future, and I think there is no way for us to get that line right. We all know that, and we know we're probably going to have to move it again, but we're hoping that's what I love about our school district. I think we do look at the individual child many times, and I think we will do everything we can to make sure that students get to go where they want to go. And so, but I just wanted to also ask the question, because I can't remember, but Chapin Elementary and Lake Murray right now are not school of choice, and you're not thinking that we can make them school of choice this year, so we'd have to put that off.
That is correct, yes, ma'am. And to answer the line piece, if I may, Ms. Hammond, we need lines for transportation purposes. And of course, Mr. Wiseman, if he were here tonight, he may be in the room tonight. I don't do well identifying people in crowds. We need to start working towards what those routes are going to look like, and for Piney Woods to be staffed, and for Ms. Pascal to do what she is sitting on go. We're holding her back until we get some things resolved so that she can start building that school community and recruiting partners and parents into creating that school climate that she's envisioned with our support.
Let's see. You want to finish your thought, and then I'll go to Mr. Lovett.
I was say, I just have a follow-up question, but it's more about the transportation piece since you brought it up. So currently, we have several buses in our area, since there's school, freeze, that go to 2 different schools that come. I mean, my little cul-de-sac comes through twice in the morning at one time, and twice again an hour later, and then in the afternoon, twice again. It's crazy, which is fine. I'm not complaining. But you're saying that would stop. There would be one bus that goes through my neighborhood, and it goes to the school that it's zoned for, and that it would be my responsibility to get my child to the right school if I decided to take you up on the 4th grade. Mm-hmm. I'm going to keep myself at this school, but my bus doesn't go to that school. That would relieve some of the busing issues with, I guess I just wanted to clarify. So
Here's where I'm hesitant to answer that. I'm not sure if the buses that you're talking about in your cul-de-sac are elementary buses followed by intermediate buses, all those different routes. If that is one bus doing the loop for different students, that may be, but I'm not sure because I've not looked into that. Of course, our fleet is assigned to us by the State Department of Education. It is not a fleet that we manage ourselves. So Mr. Wiseman is very thoughtful, and you all have continued to be appreciative of his skills and talents. of how this is scheduled. The shuttles that we've ran from Lake Murray to Chapin Intermediate, or Lake Murray to other schools because of the enrollment freeze, we would hope that that would suspend and reduce some of those shuttles that are running, but those should be running between schools, not from neighborhoods to schools. So, but I would need to look into what may be happening in your particular area. So I'm going to ask Mr. Beando, I see he's already writing it down. We need to look to see what that bus transportation looks like within your communities to be better informed for that. But yes, to answer your question, ideally, we would like to condense the routes and the assignments of our bus drivers to shorten routes and get students to school efficiently without as long as time of transportation that they may be currently experiencing. But I could not guarantee that you would see a reduction of bus traffic depending on where that line is and depending on, you may be seeing a bus coming in for Lake Murray Elementary and a bus coming for Piney Woods in separate locations. So you may see an increase of bus transportation,
Right.
quite frankly.
Well, my question isn't about my neighborhood, because I could care less. I love the buses coming through and wave at them. My dog loves to wave at them. My question is, like, let's just say I was impacted by the enrollment freeze and my child does ride the bus. This is hypothetical because they don't. But my child rides the bus to Ballantyne because I'm impacted by the enrollment freeze. I want my child to stay there for 4th grade. I would have to then, they wouldn't be able to ride the bus anymore. I would have to transport them. I just want to clarify.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Harris, I know you and Mr. Wiseman were working on that. Can you offer a response to that? If a parent were to decide they wanted to stay at the school where they have been experiencing enrollment freeze, would transportation still be provided based upon where we currently are with our planning?
I'll be perfectly honest, I'm a little ill-equipped to answer transportation questions. So I'd certainly like to have this conversation and respond a little more accurately with you. But I will tell you that, as with any case, it would be contingent upon routes and contingent upon availability on these buses based on the requirements in which the state has imposed upon the number of students on buses. So there are a couple of factors that we would have to consider, and obviously all of this I would need to have some in-depth conversation with transportation, if that was even doable. But what we've reported on tonight is consistent with what our policy says in terms of transportation and choice options.
And it would also be affected by what families would choose. So if you're a current family that has experienced enrollment freeze, but you prefer to go back, you wouldn't need that transportation anymore to that next site. So it's going to depend, that's why this is so complicated, that we need to settle some of these details down.
All right, that makes sense. Wait and see.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that when we, and Ms. Gardner hit on that, but when we discuss school of choice, Lake Murray and Chapin and the new school on Amix Ferry Road are not the only schools in the district. And we need to look at, I know Irmo Elementary, we need to look at that. You know, we need to look at this in a comprehensive way and just not those particular schools. And so I didn't want the discussion just to end there. And that's why I think we should have a different discussion on a different night about this whole subject.
To piggyback on that, your first question, I do think since this is so important to parents and children, and anytime you're talking about children moving and making choices, I would like to think we have gotten feedback, Dr. Milton, from this presentation, where we could have not a vote on this tonight, and we could have your communication department get this out, and then we come back, and like Mr. Lovely said, you know, a comprehensive discussion. Because just like Ms. Hines had her question, just from being here and listening, you still needed some clarification. So I'm thinking that if that will not put you in a bind, you know, and I don't mean forever, but maybe let this go out in communication, and we feel like that the people really understand it, and then they have an opportunity to come and speak.
Yes, ma'am. So I think what I'm hearing is that we're going to communicate with the clarification that we spoke about, Ms. Blackburn-Hines asked. So Dr. Harris has noted that one. We'll make sure that's cleaned up so that families who are impacted clearly understand their choice, whether it's to stay at the school that they've been experiencing enrollment freeze with, or to return to their home zone school, depending on where they may be zoned. I heard that. But just for my clarification, Ms. Hammond, I've heard the interest of delaying the school of choice portion for Piney Woods. if the board chooses to take action to approve the first part, we definitely have a communications plan that we'll get out tomorrow. If the board just says this is for a report, we'll proceed with that, but we'll delay the part. I clearly hear the need for the conversation for Piney Woods Elementary to be school of choice, or that discussion be at a broader scope.
So the school of choice, the first bullet, you don't feel like we need the more discussion on? That's your opinion?
It is our recommendation for Piney Woods to start with staffing for Dr. Turner to get involved with Ms. Paschal, is for Piney Woods to be considered school of choice, because that's one more application we're going to need to open with process. Our school choice has already happened, and then we've done 5. So I'm becoming concerned about the application fatigue that our families may be experiencing. We're doing some surveys right now. We've done some applications, and I don't want people to overlook, so we need to really concentrate what the communication may look like. But if it's of the will of the board that this be discussed next Monday night on the 8th or following meeting, we need to time this communication, because the last thing I want to do is put information out and then try to retract it because of any changes that the board may have.
Gotcha.
So what might there be comfort for us to start communicating to make sure that with assurance that we could offer would happen for our students in our community?
And let me ask you, I don't think anybody asked this, where, do we have a number set, since it is a school of choice and it's a brand-new school, so it isn't like we've got, we don't know the number there that we can add. Do you have a number that we would cut that off as in choice?
The exemption piece is going to be important, because once, Dr. Harrison, you all have received some emails as well. Families that are engaged and watchful, they are becoming interested and or anxious, depending. They want to know. So Dr. Harris has got some messages in his inbox, just as you all have gotten some, but we need to find a way to get a stronger response to that with assurance of a commitment. So those pieces, we have the numbers from Ilona McBroom. Of course, you all approved the scenario that you did with the revisions that were made. But what we don't know is how many families may want to take advantage of these exemptions once redistricting is introduced. So if we have a small percentage, then you may not see a significant impact. But otherwise, Dr. Harris could have the opportunity, if Dr. Turner has assigned, and I'll make this up on the fly, 4 teachers to teach grade 3, she may say we have a capacity of 100 students with 25 students per class, or 24 students per class. So that'd be the capacity. Then she may say to Dr. Harris, we have 7 available seats that we could fill off the capacity of 3rd grade. So Dr. Harris would allow in a lottery process to fill those 7 seats. If Dr. Turner were to say, I'm sorry, we're at capacity already, then that grade level is not even open to school choice for that 3rd grade if she already had 24 and 25 per class. Instead, PK, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 4th, make sure I track my own scenario, would then have choices of schools that are open. The way we would do is Spring Hill as an example. That freshman class has a different number that we can enroll versus the upper class with fewer seats. So we would need to track that as well.
So right now, the line that we approved, there's, do we know the number of kids that are in that line?
Yes, ma'am. If that was, Dr. Harris, approximately 390 based upon, I'm going from memory, I don't have that in front of me, so I would say approximately 400. I'll bump it up a little bit based upon the information without exemptions being requested and without school choice being added. We were looking at approximately 400 students.
Okay, I got you. Well, I would entertain, I'll let the board decide if you would like to make a motion to approve that it would be a school of choice of K through 4th, and with, on the meeting for the next meeting, after you've advertised, so that we feel like the community understands what their choices are. Unless, and it's fine, I hear Dr. Melton saying if the board feels like by Monday, that's not that much later, that this comes out from this public meeting, and we make the motion and vote on it on the 8th. I mean, not the 8th, today's first, on the 8th. Ms. Gardner.
My thoughts on this is that I'd like to wait till the next board meeting.
Okay. Any other thoughts? So anyone want to entertain a motion, or we'll just wait till Dr. Melton? I'm not hearing another, Ms. Hines?
So I have, I guess, a couple of concerns, and I'm going to seek clarification on the conversation of whether or not we're talking about postponing the conversation to next week to talk about school choice with all of the elementary schools, or just Piney Woods? It kind of lost me there. My thoughts on making Piney Woods a school of choice is that the school is at half capacity, approximately, and there are a lot of families in those 3 school zones or across District 5 that are trying to make decisions on where to send their kids and how that looks for work schedules and transportation schedules, and just trying to get all of that information together on, should they apply to go to Piney Woods? Should they stay where they're going to be redistricted? Should they stay where they are currently enrolled? There are a lot of questions, and the longer that we put it off, the harder it is for families to make those decisions, because at the end of the day, Piney Woods is not going to be over capacity.
No.
We
I
need to
agree.
put bodies in seats. I mean, it helps alleviate some of the other problems at Chapin Elementary and at Lake Murray Elementary, because when you look at those numbers, I have concerns that, there's still pretty full classrooms at both of those schools. So I just think at some point, it's not an easy decision, but we have to make a decision.
I have no problem with making a decision, so I think that your points are well taken. It's definitely should be a school of choice because of the number that are in the line that would just be automatically going to that school. So I think what I was just hearing is whether we want to just do that part of in a motion tonight so you can move forward, that we advertise the fact that it's going to be. Is that your point? And then people would know that's going to be part of their choices. But I think where there was confusion was about the freeze and about, what schools would have the ability to choose, right?
My confusion was, Mr. Lovelace mentioned, Chapin Elementary is not a school of choice, and Lake Murray is not a school of choice, and maybe we look at the whole district and the choice of the schools. I could have misunderstood that. The problem is, I don't discourage a conversation about that, but I don't see that being applicable for next school year, and we're trying to make decisions for next school year. So personally, I think that it's a good idea to make Piney Woods a school of choice, and I think that it's a good idea to have a conversation about choice overall at a later date. But I think that decisions need to be made.
Okay.
Just my thoughts.
Did you have your hand up? Oh, Ms. Huddle.
Well, I'll just go ahead and make a motion. I move that we approve making Piney Woods a school of choice for the 21-22 school year, and that we put on the agenda in the next 2 meetings a full review of the school of choice program.
Do I have a second? I have a second by Ms. Hines. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Ms. Huddle's motion? And that is 6-0.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hammond. The next report this evening, the third of 4. Mr. Giuliano is going to leave. The board has a presentation regarding our 5 program. Mr. Giuliano, our Chief of Instruction, is going to be offering this presentation this evening. Mr. G.
Thank you, Dr. Melton. We do have an update for you this evening about 5, our Flexible Innovative Virtual Education Program. Back at our last board meeting on February 8th when we presented this, we talked about the purpose of offering 5 for this year. 5 was created for the pandemic in 2021, and looking ahead to 21-22, we were looking to create it as a choice program for the school district. Our recommendation that we're showing you here tonight is based upon the application data that I'm going to share in a few minutes. The first recommendation would be a Tier 1, which is our recommendation would be to offer 5 first grade through 12th grade, with high school having a modified model of instruction, which I'll explain in a moment. Tier 2 would be an option for the board as well, would be kindergarten through 12th grade, and then Tier 3 would be 1st through 8th grade. So that's our 3 tiers of recommendations there, with Tier 1 being our primary recommendation. This slide here we shared at the February 8th board meeting. This was our minimum and maximum numbers per grade level, and then you see for the high school as well. You'll note that for kindergarten, I'll draw your attention there, we had a minimum of 20 and a maximum of 50 for kindergarten. And I'll also draw your attention to high school, grades 9 through 12, where we had a minimum of 400 and a maximum of 600, I'm sorry. And then you add the special education classrooms there as well to add the extra additional 15 students for the high school as well. Here's our application results. So what you'll notice is we have that broken down by grade level to show you, and then on this next slide, it really highlights these particular areas. So the key that you notice, and on the screen that I'm looking at, the coloring's a little bit off, so I'll explain it differently because it doesn't match the highlights at the bottom. For grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8, all of those grade levels exceeded the maximum. So we actually do have an applicant pool that we can pull from as families possibly decline their 5 acceptance. For grade 7, we did not meet the maximum, but we did exceed the minimum to be able to offer grade 7. In the other grade levels, kindergarten, they had that 15, so it did not meet the 20 minimum. And then grades 9 through 12 collectively did not meet the minimum of 400, which we had set. They had 365. So our proposed staffing moving forward, and this is based upon our Tier 1 recommendation. So the difference between our Tier 1 recommendation here and what we presented on February 8th is, since we did not meet our minimum for our high school, what we can offer is, our original plan was to offer all of our high school programs with our School District 5 teachers and to have that live instruction on a daily basis. We still believe we can offer that in most classes, but because we're not quite at that minimum, we'll have to fill in some classes using SC Virtual Franchise, which is a virtual program that we offer in our district. So a few of our courses could be that SC Virtual option for our students, where primarily most of our classes would still be that live instruction from teachers on a daily basis. The proposed staffing there is also based on the Tier 1 recommendation. This is very similar to what was presented on February 8th as well, these positions throughout the 5 program. Our program costs, we adjusted this based upon the new tiers that we presented. The Tier 1, which was our recommendation, was grades 1st through 12th grade, and this includes our staffing, board-approved supplements, and programs based upon the funding from this past year, and the 2021 average salaries with benefits and fringe, which is used for that staffing. So you see the estimated cost for those 3 areas for our Tier 1, our Tier 2, which is kindergarten through 12th grade, and our Tier 3, which is 1st through 8th grade. So back to our recommendation for Tier 1 would be 1st grade through 12th grade, with high school having that modified model of instruction that I mentioned. We'd be looking at a new minimum of 315 students to have a minimum. So we would be able to, if the board was to approve Tier 1, we could send out our acceptance for 9th through 12th grade, trying to meet that minimum of 315 students for that Tier 1. We also have as options for the board as a Tier 2 kindergarten through 12th grade or a Tier 3 option, which is 1st through 8th grade, because 1st through 8th grade is what met the minimums from the original acceptance. And with that, Dr. Melton, I'll turn it back over to you.
Mr. Giuliano, I'd like to thank you. I see Dr. Blunt in the audience tonight as our leader of our secondary 5. I don't know if Ms. Lunsford's here this evening, but she definitely has been heavily involved with leading and coordinating and supporting our staff that have trailblazed this new chapter of School District 5's history, and of course, every family that's participated. Ms. Hammond, we know there's going to be questions. Mr. Giuliano is going to stay at the mic so that we can offer any responses to questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Dr. Milton. Mr. Lovelace.
Dr. G, you may not know this answer because I don't think finance is in your realm, but can we make sure that the costs of 5 are kept separate? And you may have already had plans to do that, but in accounting, so that we can see, at the end of next year what the costs are.
I'll take that, Mr. Lovelace. Ms. Rawls knows that's on one of the lists of one of the items on one of the lists that she and I have reviewed, and that's before she even got on campus today. So we're very aware of the interest of the board to have that information. That's part of the work that we're trying to do. Of course, the staff that accepts the opportunity, students that will affect the staffing and the enrollment, all that will be a part of it. But we have plans, Mr. Lovelace, to make sure that we can report to the board cost of 5, and of course, there's going to be some that are consistent. I'll use devices. Ms. Garris, if she were at the microphone, she would say all means all. All students are going to be using a Chromebook, so that cost will be comparable. But we are definitely going to find a way that we can track this information to give to the board as we look towards year 2 of this model.
Good. Ms. Gardner?
I was just going to say, I like the idea of using the SC Virtual to supplement what's, and I think, I'll just say from my own experience, SC Virtual is still available to any student to use. But I was worried about limiting this classes to, because there's so much that they can take and they need to take, and it would be hard for us to offer everything. So it's nice that they have that option and that we'll even rely on it because they could even help each other if they're in the same classes and things like that, so.
Thank you.
And Dr. Melton, if I may, one benefit of using SC franchise is that we can actually have our teachers as teachers of record as well, which is a positive.
Yeah, that's good. Yes, Ms. Hines?
My question is relating to the high school instruction with the modified model, similar to what Ms. Gardner just said, but it relates to whether or not the families that have accepted their application into 5, do they know about this modified model, that there may be there may be a live instructor from the district and SE virtual school? Do they know that already, and are they okay with that? And if they want to change their mind because of it, is that a concern? I'm just curious.
That's a good question. For grades 9 through 12, we have not sent acceptance emails yet.
Okay.
So we have held 9 through 12th grade because it did not meet the minimum. And we had informed those families that we would give them an update by March the 3rd, which is Wednesday.
Okay.
So based upon tonight's results is the information that we'll share with them by Wednesday of this week.
Okay, and will that increase the course offerings because we are going to modify that instruction?
We would have the same course offerings that we put in our course guide.
Okay.
That we put out originally with the application, so the same courses that would be offered there. Now, whenever there's an opportunity for a child to take an SC virtual course, they certainly can with approval through the school.
Okay.
But for the 5 model itself, using our teachers as teachers of record, we would stick to the courses within the course guide.
Thank you.
Let me see, Ms. Huddle or Mr. White before, okay, Mr. Lovelace.
I just want to make a comment that the feedback that I've gotten is just that about the course offering for the high school students. They were disappointed that we can't offer a wider range of courses, and I think what we're doing is targeting this toward the toward the required courses, if I had to say it that way. And so there was feedback, and I think that might be the reflection in the numbers that you got back. So
I think that's a valid point, Mr. Lovelace. We, of course, this year's 5 operation, Dr. Blunt was challenged to have as a competitive curricular program as we could offer during a time that was a pandemic. But now that there has been a vaccine that is being offered to those that are interested with the scheduling of that, looking ahead, we've got to find a way to manage this more successfully so that we don't have teachers in 2 different models. I know that was a great concern to the board of having that extra strain on teachers, but some of that strain has happened to make sure that we could have competitive curriculums during a time that was health crisis of concern for environment. So you will see more of an alignment with Carnegie credits that are required, but having the offerings through SC Virtual will certainly be a competitive opportunity that students could take advantage of if they choose to.
And that's a good point, Mr. Lovelace, because the more courses you offer, the more staffing we're going to need as well. And you need to make sure there's enough students that are interested in a particular course for it to make as well. So the larger we make the course guide, the more staffing that we're going to need to make sure we offer as well.
Ms. Huddle.
I just really have a recommendation based on some of the emails that I've received. I think some people are not really clear that this is no longer a reaction to the pandemic, that this is a permanent model that we plan to offer because the needs of some students and families may fit better in a virtual. So just when we promote it, to re-emphasize that.
Thank you. We'll make sure that we include the most recent policy that the board passed so that we can include that with communications, because you're right. It was a response necessary, but now we're looking forward towards the future and how that's going to affect our strategic plan with the resources. Thank you for that feedback, Ms. Huddle.
Dr. G, so things like band and chorus, like I heard that from parents too. It's just no way with virtual to work the different electives in, I guess.
There's no guarantee, well, there's a few things with that. Number one, it does become equity because it would require families that can drive their child to those particular classes. Number two, it also would depend upon the scheduling, is we cannot guarantee that each of our high schools will offer the same exact schedule that our 5 program would offer. With CTE courses, they go for half a day. So the half a day does line up and it does match. But when you're talking about one course to go in for a dance class, for example, in person, that requires a class as well as an extracurricular activity, there's no guarantee that we can offer that it aligns with the scheduling.
And I would just say, and I'm sure you're doing this, I'm saying it mainly for the public, but I think the important thing is that we communicate that before people make their choices. Because if people know the facts before they make a choice, I feel like we've been fair as a school district. And so I think it's good that we're letting them know what we can and can't do before they decide on it. And I had one more question. So it's the first, am I right, 1st through 8th, which is Tier 3, that's the one that met the numbers you needed?
Correct. All the grades 1st through 8th grade met the minimum.
That shocks me. I would think smaller kids would not pick virtual, but I do know older kids like to be together too. So what is our plan? And you may have said that, but I'm trying to put this in my head. For the ones that haven't met it, we haven't finished. I mean, there's time they could still meet it. Is that, in other words, it had closed out?
The application
Right.
did close.
But, well, I mean, I guess, so if that's the only one that met it, are you saying to us tonight that's the only one we should fund right now? Or are you going to wait and hope to hear from the others?
It's our hope, Ms. Hammond, if we had, looking at the slide that we've got up for you, that first bullet, we would like to make sure that we offer the opportunity to focus upon all grade levels with a different configuration. Originally, we had not talked about what we have entitled here as Modified Model of Instruction for that 9 through 12. We had not considered that as an option.
That's a new one.
That's
That's in dark.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
That's in
okay.
response to the number of students in grades 9 through 12 that showed interest at this point. Now, we know that it's
Gotcha.
likely that changes are going to happen, hardships and adjustments will be sought of Dr. Harris at different points of the time in the coming year, but it's our recommendation that we don't create disruption, but we offer a complete flow of educational experiences.
So what you would like tonight, it would really help you and your staff if we have a motion on that and get that one moving.
We felt the last time for us to be in compliance, we did not meet that threshold for 9 through 12 that we reported to you that the board did take action on, so we felt that we needed to bring it back, which is why we've not communicated to the families of rising 9th through 12th graders, as Mr. Giuliano responded to Ms. Blackburn-Hines.
Okay. I got you. Yes, Ms. Gardner.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the school district's recommendation that we use Tier 1, 1st grade through 12th grade, with high school 9 through 12 having a modified model of instruction.
Is there a second? Ms. Hines, second?
I'll second.
Any discussion other than what we've discussed? All those in favor? 6. And all those opposed? 0. Good, thank you. I think that'll help you.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond.
You're
The
welcome.
fourth and final report tonight is one of celebration. I'm going to ask Dr. Turner, our Chief of Human Resources, to come to the podium, and she has some introductions and a presentation that the Office of Human Resources will offer. Dr. Turner.
Thank you, Dr. Melton. One of our favorite times of the year in the Office of Human Resources is recruitment season, and it is upon us. Not only does it provide us with an opportunity to continue to promote why School District 5 continues to be one of the #1 districts for students to learn and teachers to teach, it also provides an opportunity for us to align our work in the Office of Human Resources with the district's strategic plan and superintendent's priority. This has been an unprecedented challenge because recruitment, the look of it, has changed. However, I'm very fortunate in the Office of Human Resources to work with professionals that are ready for the challenge, and I think you will be proud of the work that they've done. I know that you've already met Dr. Reggie Wicker, and I want to identify him again tonight. Dr. Wicker comes to the Office of Human Resources with a wealth of background knowledge at the school level, at the human resources level, and I just so appreciate his willingness to come in and hit the ground running with recruitment efforts. It is also my honor tonight to introduce Ms. Melanie Cohen, the coordinator of personnel, and I'm so appreciative to the work Mrs. Cohen has put into leading the way with a lot of our virtual recruitment events. So I'm going to pass the mic to Mrs. Cohen and offer just sincere gratitude for all of the work that you've dedicated toward keeping us in step and aligned with virtual recruitment efforts. Mrs. Cohen.
Thank you for this opportunity tonight to share with you the ongoing efforts of the Office of Human Resources regarding recruitment. We had our first ever virtual recruitment event on Saturday, February 6th, and it was a great success. We used a platform called Premier Virtual. We have had 231 people registered for the event, and of those, 199 of them actually logged in and showed up that day. But here's some metrics we didn't have before, which I think are very telling. We had 1,780 booth visits. That means people came in to review what the information the principals had available that day. And it also shows us that we have a lot of interest in multiple schools in our district. They don't just want to be in one place, they want to be in District 5. We also had 1,003 personal contacts during the fair. That's a significant number. We had people that were talking to principals, teachers, etc. We did have, I'm going to throw another number out, we did have 141 of our teachers and administrators trained in that platform that day. So that shows you the interest and the commitment of our district to be there for that event. So we have some celebrations in the Office of Human Resources. We've had 25 total recruitment events this year so far, and those are things like college and university fairs, our virtual recruitment events, just so many different things where we're making personal connections with applicants every single day. As of October 2020, we had since October 2020, we had 314 certified candidates. Those are new applicants to our district. And actually, when I left today, that number's up to 349 and continues to climb daily. Just for some reference, in 2020, we were at 306, so we're ahead of where we were last year. The last thing I want to say is this whole notion of recruitment is a collaborative event. We work together hand in hand with the Office of Communications, the Office of Instruction, and the Office of Human Resources to make it a success. And we will continue until we have all of our vacancies filled with certified, high-quality teachers.
Thank you.
Ms. Cohen, thank you so much for that, and I'd like to make sure that I echo. Tell me again the number of where we are today, and tell me again the comparison from today to last year at this time.
We had 306 in 2020, and today we're at 349 certified new applicants.
Let's applaud that. That is impressive. And while Ms. Cohen is here, I'd like to thank our technology team. They were directly involved with this Premier Virtual, our communications team. This graphic was designed here in School District 5 by Courtney Morabito in our communications, and she listened to the vision, took the theme from the year, and created this unique graphic. Oftentimes people think we outsource this kind of work, but we have people in School District 5 that are doing this kind of level, this caliber of work. So thanks to communications and support, of course, of our Human Resources Department, and the Premier Virtual that we've used was actually the same program that our magnet schools use that many of our board members dropped in to see in action. And so other districts have actually reached out to us to find out about it, to try to follow our lead with using something brand new and it's innovative. And on behalf of Ms. Cohen, Dr. Wicker, and Dr. Turner, this team continues to share what this board and previous boards have done with class size, with appreciation bonus recently, preceded by loyalty bonuses previously. That is attractive to candidates, whether they're brand new to the field or whether they're already tenured in our field. And we mentioned and celebrated that this is recruitment season, but every day is retention season.
Yes.
So all those staff members listening in out there, we need to retain the best and brightest. We need to recruit the best and brightest because School District 5 students and community, we deserve the best and brightest. So, Ms. Cohen, thanks for your leadership. Ms. Hammond, if there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
No, we're just proud of what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody? Oh, what comments?
Ms.
Well,
Hammond, that completes the superintendent's report.